Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. This is Ravi, attending our phone.
Okay, thank you for joining. So we'll start with the Mangalacharan. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Seems to be a lag. Anyway. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayavdire nashtaprayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavate uttam shloke. YouTube is playing back.
Maybe there's an option to mute the YouTube.
Maybe I should pause it and also mute it. Maybe not.
We're only able to hear you, so your voice is coming in clear without any lag, Prabhuji.
Okay, so I have muted the YouTube. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for also thank you for giving me the opportunity. All of you have been doing a wonderful job service these past 19 or so weeks, discussing a chapter, summarizing it, and resulting in a lot of wonderful discussion. I personally enjoyed it immensely. So I know I have big shoes to fill, and I'm going to try my best. Forgive me for all the shortcomings. We'll summarize the first canto, 19 chapters. So I'll break it up into two parts. We'll do the first 3 chapters, and then we'll do the remaining 16 chapters. And the reason is that there's a slight difference in the way the theme of these 2 sections of the canto. The first canto is kind of divided into the philosophical basis, and the second part is describing the personalities involved. So one is more philosophical, and the second is more, for the lack of a better word, it's more social. It makes one familiar with the actual setting of the Bhagavatam, the speaker, the hearer, the the circumstances that led to the speaking of the Bhagavatam. So like I said, I'll discuss the 3 chapters, and after that I'll take a pause, and if there's any discussion, we'll have it, and then I will speak the remaining chapters, and then take a longer pause, and we can have any discussion on the 16 chapters or the 19 chapters. So essentially, the first canto of the Bhagavatam, the first canto of the Bhagavatam is essentially is there to to arouse both interest and faith in the reader. So it introduces us to key philosophical elements, the four B's. The four B's, which is Bhagwan, Krishna, then Bhakti, the process to attain him, Bhakta, the person trying to attain, and then Bhagavatam itself. And we will see these four B's throughout the Bhagavatam. And because the first three chapters are the philosophical perspective, they will explain this more so. And then in addition, from the fourth chapter onwards, we'll see the prominent characters of the Bhagavatam being introduced, as well as the circumstances. So essentially, the Bhagavatam is a series of nested conversations. The outermost conversation is happening between Srila Vyasadeva and us, and then he relays a conversation that's happening between Sutta Goswami and the sages of Naimisharanya that are headed by Shaunak Rishi. And then Sutta Goswami is relating a conversation that is happening between Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. So in the first canto, the setting is explained. Sukadev Goswami has yet not appeared, so it's essentially a conversation between Sutta Goswami and Shaunakadi. Towards the end of the canto, Sukadev Goswami will make his appearance. So the first chapter of the first canto, it begins with the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And then as per the Acharyas, the Bhagavatam expands from this invocation. And putting it differently, we can also understand that this invocation contains the essence of the Bhagavatam. Three different ways that we can understand it. One, that Om represents that which is Brahman. Now, Brahman refers to that which is spirit. In this case, it is referring to Jiva or the Bhakta. Namo refers to the process of attaining the Lord, which is Bhakti. Bhagavate means unto the Lord, that which leads unto the Lord, which is Bhagavatam. And Vasudevaya is the son of Vasudeva, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we see that this invocation is presenting to us the four essential topics of the Bhagavatam. The Jiva, Krishna, the process to attain, and Bhagavatam. It can also be understood as Om, that which is Brahman. Bhagavate, so Bhagavate is unto the Lord, that which leads unto the Lord, which is Paramatma. And Vasudeva is Krishna Swayam Bhagavan, the son of Vasudeva. Namo is obeisances. So essentially what it is saying is, let me offer obeisances to the personality of Godhead, who is the basis of Brahman and Paramatma. And the third understanding of the invocation is that Om indicates Sambandha. And it indicates Sambandh because it is indicating the spiritual nature of the Jiva. And Namo indicates Abhiday, which is the process of bhakti. And Bhagavate Vasudevaya is prayojan. So, by understanding the relationship, the spiritual nature of the jiva with the spiritual nature of the Lord, when one performs devotional service, one is delivered unto the Lord. So in this way, the acharyas explain that 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 the Bhagavatam is expanding from the invocation. And actually speaking, Srila Vyasadeva, right from the beginning, he establishes the supremacy of Krishna. So later on, we'll see that in the 6th chapter of the 1st canto, Vyasadeva is chastised by his Guru Narad Muni that you have written so many things in the Vedas, but they're unfortunately misleading people away from Krishna in the name of religiosity. So now he's very careful. He doesn't want to make that mistake again. So right from the beginning, the very first utterance in the Bhagavatam is Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. They're unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he specifically uses the word Vasudev to say that this is that person who is the son of Vasudeva, so that there is no ambiguity. He does not use a more generic term that is sometimes applied. He specifically uses the term that this is applied to Krishna. In the first chapter, which is titled The 6 Questions by the Sages of Naimisharanya, we see the first 3 verses talking about these 3 topics. So the first verse defines the absolute truth. The second verse glorifies the Bhagavatam. And the third verse, which is directed to the devotees, it invites them to read the Bhagavatam. So they are considered to be Manglacharan or auspicious invocation. So verse 1, it defines Sambandha, verse 2 Abhiday, and verse 3 defines Prayojan. So in the first verse, Krishna is established as the source of everything. Dharmadhiyasyata. So everything that you see is Krishna, including Lord Brahma. He is also dependent on Krishna. And then the question, of course, comes is that if everything is Krishna, then why don't people see Krishna? And that verse also answers the question that the illusion through which one is not able to see Krishna is also coming from Krishna. So after having accepted the fact that everything is Krishna, the verse invites us to Satyam Param Dhimahi. So it invites us to meditate on Krishna. And because of the word Dhimahi, the Bhagavatam is also considered to be a commentary on the Gayatri. So Dhimahi appears in the Om Bhur Bhavasva. So it appears as one of the words in the Gayatri. And from that one understands that the Bhagavatam is a commentary on Gayatri. And Srila Vyasadeva also gives us the understanding that the Bhagavatam is a commentary on the Vedanta Sutras. So specifically by using the word Om, he is establishing the Bhagavatam to be a Vedic literature. Because Vedic mantras are generally preceded by the Pranav Om. Like Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the Puranas, they don't generally have Om there, because Om is what it is the pranav that connects one to the Supreme. So Srila Vyasadeva deliberately starts with Om to say that what that is following, the 18,000 verses that are following, this Om is there in front of each of the verse. The understanding is giving is that this is a Vedic literature. Jiva Goswami comments elaborately on this in the Tattva Sandarbha, that the Bhagavatam, it's the Pancham Veda, the fifth Veda, non-different from the Vedas, because the Vedas themselves say that the Bhagavatam is a or more like the Puranas are the Vedas, and the Bhagavatam is a Mahapuran. So verse 1, it invites us to meditate on the Lord. The second verse in the Bhagavatam glorifies the actual religion or the practice of actual religion. It is Abhideh. And it starts from where the Bhagavad Gita ends. So the Bhagavad Gita ended with Krishna saying, Sarvadharam Parityaje Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraj, that abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto me. The Bhagavatam starts with Dhamma Pojata Kaitavatra, that completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. Now listen to the highest truth. So the Bhagavatam is meant for one who has already accepted the fact that surrendering to Krishna is the supreme goal of life. And after having accepted that fact, they are now ready to practice on the process of how to do that. So the Bhagavatam is now inviting them that now that you have understood that Sarvadharam Parityaje, now Dharma Projata Kaita. Now give up all these religions and follow the Bhagavad Marg of the highest truth. The third verse in the first chapter, it is an invitation for everybody to taste the nectar of Bhagavatam. So we see Vyasadeva glorifying Srimad Bhagavatam, and he's urging us to drink that nectar through our ears. These three verses are, as I mentioned, Mangalacharan verses. They're compact, but they contain the essence of what will be appearing. So it is said that the invocation unfolds into these three verses, which unfolds into the 3 chapters of the first canto, which unfolds into the 2 cantos, which unfolds into the entire Bhagavad. So with varying levels of emphasis and details, the concepts are successively expanded. So moving on, the narration of the Bhagavatam, it happens at the holy place of Naimisharanya. And we see the sages over there, they are congregated to perform a yajna for the benefit of mankind. And they realize that the highest benefit of the mankind is to partake in Bhagavad Katha. So we see them glorify Sutta Goswami and asking questions from him. So the 6 questions that the sages ask become the basis of the first 3 chapters of the Bhagavatam. And because we've established that the 3 chapters actually unfold, so we see these 6 questions being constantly addressed throughout the Bhagavatam. So what are the 6 questions that the sages asked? They asked that, what is the highest good for mankind? Then they ask is that what is the essence of all the scriptures? The third question they ask is why did Krishna appear? The fourth they ask is what are the Purusha avatars? The fifth is what are the Leela avatars? And the sixth is what did religion take shelter in after the departure of Krishna? So these will be answered later on, but for this, because we are doing a summation, I'll share the answers with you, and you'll of course see them unfold. So the first question, what is the highest good, is answered as follows: that the highest good for mankind is to develop love of God through bhakti, or to develop Krishna bhakti. That is the ultimate benefit. Then what is the essence of all the scriptures? The essence is devotional service. Why did Krishna appear? He appeared to reclaim the people in the mode of goodness. Now, this mode of goodness is not really the material mode of goodness. So this is Sattvat, that because Krishna as Lord Vishnu is in control of the mode of goodness. So this is those who follow the controller of the mode of goodness, or Vaishnavas. So essentially it means that Krishna appeared to reclaim those who are practicing devotional service, Vaishnavas, who are following Vishnu. Fourth question is that what are the Purusha avatars? And this is answered by giving an explanation on the three Purusha avatars: Karnadaksha Vishnu, Garbhadaksha Vishnu, and Kshodaksha Vishnu. Then what are the Leela avatars? So this is explained elaborately in the third chapter. And what did religion take shelter after the departure of Krishna? Perhaps the most important question, and the answer is took shelter in Srimad Bhagavatam. So everything that one gained by the association of Krishna while he was present, one can gain by the association of Bhagavatam. So the first two questions are for people in general. What is the highest goal? To love God. What is the essence of scriptures? Bhakti. And the last four questions are for devotees, because they are specifically in the context of Krishna. Why did Krishna appear? His Purusha avatars, Leela avatars, his literary incarnation. So that brings us to the end of the first chapter. So we continue to the second chapter, which is titled Divinity and Divine Service. So in this chapter, the process of the change of heart is described. And it is illustrated in the fifth chapter when we see the change of heart of Vyasadeva in the association of Narad Muni. So what is the change of heart? Is changing one's focus from material or not Krishna to Krishna. The chapter also lays the foundation of how best to associate with Bhagavatam. So the famous verse, Shrinvatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtanam, that the best way to associate with the book Bhagavatam is through the person Bhagavatam. So it prohibits the association of the Bhagavatam through the mental speculators or through those who are using it for entertainment purposes. But a person who is sharing the Bhagavatam must also be living the Bhagavatam. And the result is Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya. That all that is troublesome in the heart is destroyed. So, divinity and divine service is predicated on taking shelter of these two Bhagavats, the book Bhagavat and the devotee Bhagavat. And we see that demonstrated, that the sages of Naimisharanya take shelter of Sutta Goswami. Parikshit Maharaj takes shelter of Sukadev Goswami. Srila Vyasadeva takes shelter of Narad Muni. And throughout the Bhagavatam, we see this process. Vidur takes shelter of Maitreya. Yudhishthira takes shelter of Narad. This strong mood of taking shelter of the Vaishnava. So the chapter also answers the question of the sages that now that Krishna has gone, where does one take shelter? And it basically equates the Bhagavatam in its potency to Krishna. That's why Bhagavatam is considered to be the literary incarnation of Krishna. So Sutta Goswami, he says that the Bhagavatam is as brilliant as the sun. And after the departure of Krishna, it has come to dissipate the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali. So in this chapter, we see the answer to the first question: what is the ultimate good for the people? One of the famous verses of the Bhagavatam: Savai Pumsha Paro Dharmo Yito Bhakti Radhok Sajay Ahituki Pratiyata Ye Atma Suprasiddhi. So this is the Paro Dharma Yato Bhakti Adhok Sajay, that would develop a loving relationship that is Ahituki Pratiyata, that is causeless and uninterrupted, and performed joyfully. And then it also answers the question of what is the essence of all the scriptures. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chatad Ahituka. So Bhakti Yoga Prayojita. That this is the essence of the scriptures, that practice devotional service. And so one may say that what about the other things that the scriptures say, which is knowledge, jnana, which is renunciation, vairagya. So Sutta Goswami says, Janatyashu vairagyam jnanam chata dahitu. That without you trying for it, without you endeavoring separately for it, just by the practice of Vasudeva Bhagavati, that prayojan will be made, that arrangement will be made, that Janatyashu vairagyam, that renunciation will happen and knowledge will appear. So the devotee is never shortchanged. It's not that the devotee, because they have taken the path of bhakti directly, will not get the knowledge of the scriptures or will not be able to develop the renunciation. So these are the things that come when you gradually go through the scriptures. But Sutta promises that everything will be obtained automatically. So along with explaining what needs to be done, Sutta Goswami also speaks in this chapter about what should not be done. So he speaks about Kaitav Dharma. So Kaitav Dharma is essentially religion for sense gratification. And he says that should be summarily rejected. So he makes the point both ways. What you should do is Vasudeva Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, Savai Pumsha Parodharma. This is what you should do. And what you should not do is take shelter of religion for sense gratification. Now, after explaining the path, Sutta Goswami then in this chapter talks about the goal. And here he speaks one of the Paribhashutra, or the defining verses of the Bhagavatam, 1 3, 1 to 11. Vadanti tattva tattva vedas tattvam yash jnanam advayam brahmeti parmateti bhagavan iti shabdiyate. That one realizes the Lord in three forms. Brahmeti as Brahman, Parmateti as Paramatma, and Bhagavan as the personality of Godhead. And this is the companion verse to a verse that will appear in the third chapter, Etecham Sakala Pumsha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, where, so here he says, Bhagavan iti shabdayate. There he will say, who is Bhagavan? Etecham Sakala Pumsha Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So here he defines a position, there he defines the person who is sitting in that position, which is Krishnastu. That only Krishna is there. In the concluding section, or the penultimate, the pre-concluding section, Sutta Goswami talks about the progression of bhakti. So after having introduced the notion of bhakti, he then gives us a roadmap of how one progresses from initial shraddha, some kind of faith, to prema. And is also described in the 5th and the 6th chapter. So he's giving us more insight into the nuances of bhakti. That bhakti is, it's a journey. It starts from having some kind of faith, and then from there it moves through the various stages until one has intense love. So we see that how Sutta Goswami is very masterfully, he's mapping out the journey for us. Where we are, where we need to be, what the path is, and then what are the milestones that we will see on the path. At Shraddha you will see this, at Sadhu Sang you will see this, Bhajan Kriya you will see this. So he is in a precise way describing the science of devotion. And then finally in the concluding part, he speaks about the Purusharthas, because this is one of the questions the sage has asked. And the reason that the sages ask about the Purusharthas of Krishna are specifically in the context of the material creation. So if you notice the opening verse of the Bhagavatam, it describes Krishna in relationship to the material world. That he creates, annihilates, maintains and annihilates. That he is that on whom Brahma is resting. Now Krishna is more than that. Krishna is there in the spiritual world. He is dancing with the gopis. He is playing tricks on his parents. But Sukadeva Goswami or Vyasadeva, they don't speak that, because we are not ready to listen to that. We are not ready to appreciate that. But because we are creatures of the material world, we can relate to the material world. So Krishna is presented in the context of the material world. It's a valid connection. It's a part of his connection. And for us, it's the most important, because that's where we are. Similarly, when the question of the Purusharthas are asked, it is through the Purusharthas that Krishna creates the material world. So that's why the Purusharthas are asked, and then the Leela avatars are asked, which will come in the next chapter. So this ends the second chapter, and we move on to the third chapter, which is Krishna is the source of all incarnations. So this is a discussion of the various Leela avatars. The purpose of this question is for us to understand the ongoing protection that Krishna offers us. So in the second chapter, Krishna is presented as Vasudeva Param Gatim. That the purpose of life is to please Krishna. So one who belongs to the Varnashram, they please Krishna by their work. The Jnanis, they glorify Krishna by the knowledge. The Yogis, they meet Krishna in the heart through Astanga. And the devotees, they develop love for Krishna. So how to practically achieve this? Sutta Goswami has spoken about bhakti. Now, bhakti, when it is progressing through different stages, it requires sustenance because Shraddha is weak. So the sages have asked, and Sutta Goswami speaks about the Leela avatars, that look, Krishna is coming again and again and again. He is coming to protect you. He performs these wonderful pastimes by which you can fix your meditation on him. So the discussion of the Leela avatars is that one way or the other, we develop faith in Krishna. We see him coming as Narsingadev. Oh, he's not discussed in the Leela avatar, but other avatars, the Kurma avatar, the Matsya avatar, all these are no, I think Narsingadev is discussed. I'm sorry. So all these avatars are discussed so that we are struck with awe and wonder that look, Krishna does all that. We feel protected that Krishna hasn't abandoned us. It's not that as Purush Avatar he created the material universe and went into Yoga Nidra, but he is repeatedly coming again and again only for our benefit. And then ultimately it also leads to the understanding of the position of Krishna. So this is where the main Paribhasha Sutra verse comes, 1328. That Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when Krishna is being spoken about, then somebody can say, what about Lord Ram? What about Lord Balram? What about Parshuram? What about Narsingadev? What about Matsya? And that verse clarifies that confusion. Etechyam sakala pumsha, that they're all expansions of Krishna. Krishna is to Bhagavan Swayam. He is the basis of all of these. Then and then the position with respect to Indra is mentioned, that he is the protector of Indra. Why? Because the same point is extended to the demigods, that even the demigods are dependent. The Leela avatars are non-different from Krishna, but they depend on, he is the source of them, and he is also the protector of Indra, the king of demigods. So essentially, the chapter and the verse, it clarifies the position of Krishna as the source of everything. So that brings us to the end of the first part of the summation, the third chapter. I'll take a pause over here, see if there is any comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, the first question and second question, it seems the answer for both the questions is same, Prabhuji. Highest good for mankind is Krishna Prema, and essence of all scriptures is also devotional service. Devotional service and love of God are same, so it is like covering the same point in different perspectives, Prabhuji, or any deeper reason is there?
Yeah, they're same, they're similar. Okay.
Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Okay, so then
Hare,
let me.
Hare Krishna, Bhari Prabhuji. I just had one curious question. The first part of this section that you explained to us very beautifully, the importance of Om and the relevance of Bhagavatam, the first few verses. Where are the details on this mentioned, Prabhuji? Because is it there in the Bhagavatam itself, or is it glorified elsewhere? That's where you picked from.
So part of it is from the commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and part of it is basically realizations of other Vaishnavas. So some of this is Gopi Parandan Prabhu's realizations that are there, which of course he's sharing the realizations of others. I unfortunately don't know the source, but essentially they are realized. Then they don't appear in the Bhagavatam itself.
Right, Prabhuji, got it. Because it's so beautiful and we never read about it, but we have always heard from you, so I was curious to know. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Sure.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandat Pranam. Just a quick clarification, Prabhu. I mean, Bhagavatam, it is always mentioned that unless we read it from the beginning, it's not the full Bhagavatam. That means including the conversation between Shuta Goswami and the other sages gathered at Naimisharanya. And also we look at a lot of information that or questions that has been asked by all these sages to Shuta Goswami, and then Shuta Goswami explaining that. That was not part of the conversation between Parikshit Maharaj and Sukadeva Goswami. So, how do we understand that so much related information was not discussed in the main Bhagavatam discussion between Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit? Is it because Parikshit Maharaj and all the assembled devotees or the sages, the Gyanis who were assembled with him, they were already at that level to understand directly the other matters that has been discussed by Sukadeva Goswami, or is there any specific reason behind why those parts were not part of the main conversation?
So Jiva Goswami speaks about this in Bhagavad Sandarbha, and he says that when Srila Vyasadeva composed the Bhagavatam, he composed it right from Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya till the end. Now, how did Vyasadeva know that what's the conversation that is going to happen between Sutta Goswami and the sages, between Parishit Maharaj and the sages? Because he's Trikalaki. So he knew ahead of time, and that is essence in a sense the Bhagavatam. The second thing that you'll notice is that every answer that Sutta Goswami gives will later on be given by Sukadeva Goswami. So from a chronological point of view, Sutta Goswami is sitting in Naimisharanya after the conversation between Parishit Maharaj and Sukadeva Goswami has already happened. So each and every answer that he gives is essentially a paraphrasing of the answers that will be or that have been given by Sukadeva Goswami. So there is no difference between the conversation that is happening between Sutta and the sages and between Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's proceed to the second part of the first canto, which is just probably a little easier because it's past tense. So we now come to the fourth chapter, which is the appearance of Narad Muni. And the chapter opens with and the sages asking a set of questions to Sutta Goswami. So essentially the Bhagavatam, the first canto, is an answer to 10 questions. 6 questions that are asked in the first chapter and 4 questions that are asked in the fourth chapter. So in the first 3 chapters, the theme of the potency of Bhagavatam, the relevance of Bhagavatam, the efficacy has been emphasized over and over again. So the sages are now curious to know about Bhagavatam. So they are like, tell us more about the Bhagavatam. So they say that, who wrote the Bhagavatam? So they're questioning, they're asking about Srila Vyasadeva. Who spoke the Bhagavatam? They're asking about Sukadeva Goswami. Who was the Bhagavatam spoken to? So they're asking about Parikshit Maharaj. What were the circumstances in which the Bhagavatam manifested? So they're asking about the scenario in which Bhagavatam appears. So these 4 questions about the author, Vyasadeva, the speaker, Sukadeva Goswami, the audience, Parikshit Maharaj, and the circumstances in which it appears. Essentially, the first 3 questions establish the disciplic succession. That from Vyasa it came to Sukadeva Goswami, from Sukadeva Goswami it comes to Parikshit Maharaj and Sutta Goswami, and then it goes further down. So it's establishing the pedigree that the Bhagavatam, because if somebody has to put their life on a scripture, they need to be sure that it is coming from the right source. So this is establishing the parampara. That yes, the same Vyas who wrote all the scriptures is author of the Bhagavatam. And then the point that is made is that Srila Vyasadeva, who is the literary incarnation, speaks to Sukadeva Goswami, who is the Vairagya incarnation, who speaks to Parikshit Maharaj, who is the emblem of Bhakti. So the Bhagavatam has been distilled with Gyan, Vairagya and Bhakti, or more appropriately condensed. Primarily Bhakti, but Gyan and Vairagya. Srila Vyasadeva is the same author of Vedanta Sutras, one of the most difficult pieces of scriptures to understand. The renunciation of Sukadeva Goswami was famous. He didn't even wear any clothes. He was that renounced. And Maharaj Parikshit was a Mahabhagavat. So it has come through this very exalted pedigree. Then we see the focus turning to Srila Vyasadeva. That Vyasadeva first appears in a mood of dejection. That he is wondering that I have done my duties. That as the appointed Vyas of the Mahayuga, I have compiled the Vedas. I have written the Vedanta Sutras. I have written the Puranas and the Itihas. But yet I am feeling morose. And as an exalted personality, he knows that the soul will be unhappy if it has not served the Lord properly. But he does not know how has he failed his duties. He is unable to discern. So that gets us to the 5th chapter. Narad's instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva. So as Vyas is contemplating about his own potential shortcomings, Narad Muni appears on his own accord. And as an expert devotee, he succinctly and accurately points out the reason for Vyasa's dejection. He says that you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the personality of Godhead. And then as a guru, he chastises. He says the philosophy that does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord is considered as worthless. So can you imagine Srila Vyasadeva, his life's effort of compiling the Vedas, and then the Puranas and the Itihas and the Sutras, dividing it, teaching it, and Narad Muni comes and says that all that you have done is useless. But this also helps us to understand the role of a guru and the mood of a disciple. Even though Narad is criticizing the life efforts of Vyas, the glory of Vyas is that he accepts that criticism and inquires. Narad says that what you have done is verily condemned and quite unreasonable. So he's using harsh words to do what Vyas was doing as service to mankind. And he's saying essentially what you have done is that you have given people karam kant. In the name of religion, they will follow what you have told them without being able to establish a connection with Krishna. And this, he says, is worthy of being condemned. So in order to give an impress on Vyasadeva the potency of bhakti, Narada uses himself as an example. And he relates his previous life, where he was the son of a maidservant, and how he associated with the Bhakti Vedantas. And even though he had no qualifications, he was born of low birth in the family of a Shudra. He did not have a father. He had no education, no qualification, just the causeless mercy of devotees. And what did the causeless mercy appear as? That they planted the seed of bhakti in his heart. And because of that, he has reached this exalted position. So the lessons we have from this chapter is that although one is qualified in Vedic knowledge and Vedanta Sutra, that is not sufficient to satisfy the soul. In fact, it will just do the opposite. Even following disciplinary vows or gaining knowledge is not going to help the soul. It's like somebody is thirsty and then you are giving the person salt water. Only bhakti gives ultimate relief. And the good news is that it is easily performed. That takes us to the 6th chapter now, which is conversation between Narad and Vyas, which is a continuation by Narad of his life story. That after the Bhakti Vedantas left, then he continued to serve his mother, but unfortunately his mother died. And freed of all responsibilities, Narad travels far and wide, and then he appreciates the glories of Krishna's material manifestation. He sees jungles and he sees mountains, he sees towns and he sees cities. So he appreciates Krishna in nature. And then once, when he sits to concentrate, Krishna appears in his heart and disappears. And after that does not appear again. And the reason that Krishna says, I've appeared, is to increase your longing for me, to give you a taste of me. And the reason I have disappeared is because you have still not been fully purified. And Narad's contamination at the time was that he was attracted to the mode of goodness, just to the material mode. So the lessons in this chapter is that that only by training under a bona fide spiritual master can one gain the intelligence to perform bhakti. Bhakti is not something that one does whimsically based on your own inclination. Sometimes people say it's between me and Krishna, and whatever I do is bhakti. And you ask somebody to chant 1 round or 10 rounds or whatever, and they'll say, oh, I'm chanting all the time, but I don't need to chant on Japmala. So ultimately they are whimsical. But the point that is made here is that it has to be performed under a bona fide spiritual master and according to the instructions of the master. That was the only qualification on Narad Muni. That after he was associating with them, he performed what he was told to do. And the potency of chanting the glories of the Lord is also enunciated over here. That's what the Bhakti Vedantas did. That's what Narad Muni said, that when Krishna disappeared, he spent the rest of his life chanting the glories of Krishna. And because of that, he attained perfection. When he gave up his material body, at the same time, he got a spiritual body because of his constant engagement in the chanting of Krishna's name. That gets us to the 7th chapter now, the son of Drona punished. So after Narad Muni leaves, Srila Vyasadeva deeply meditates on the instructions of Narad, and he deeply meditates on the creation. And he sees, in his meditation, he sees Krishna. He sees the material energy of Krishna. He sees the jiva suffering under the material energy of Krishna. And he also sees the spiritual kingdom. And then he understands that what he did and what he could do. So with this vision, he compiles the Bhagavatam. And after having compiled it, he teaches it to his son, Sukadeva Goswami, not because he was his son, but because he was a suitable recipient of the Bhagavatam. And then the Bhagavatam is held in the hearts of Vyasadeva and Sukadeva Goswami, awaiting the appearance of a qualified recipient. Now Sutta Goswami changes the focus. He speaks about Ashvathama. And the change of focus is that having answered the questions about Vyasadeva and Sukadeva Goswami appears very briefly over here. He'll appear more in the 19th chapter. But this is to the extent that the question is answered. He will now proceed to answer the question regarding Parishit Maharaj. So in order to speak about Parishit Maharaj, he rewinds and speaks. He speaks right from the time that Parishit Maharaj's first encounter with Krishna, while still in the womb of his mother. So he brings the attention of the sages and our attention to Krishna driving the chariot of Arjuna. But this is after the battle of Mahabharata. So Mahabharata has finished, the Pandavas have won. On the Kauravas side, Duryodhana has been mortally wounded by Bhima, left for dead. Only Ashvathama, Kripa and Kritvarma survived. And then on the Pandavas side, those who had survived were in a camp. And Ashvathama, basically because he was upset that Dronacharya was killed, but also to please Duryodhana, he attacks the Pandavas' camp at night and he massacres everybody. He kills the 5 sons of Draupadi. He kills her 2 brothers, Drishtadumna and Shikhandi. And he kills the other survivors also. So the Pandavas were not there in the camp at the time. So when they come, they find out about it and Arjuna is angry. So he promises to Draupadi that I will come back with the head of Ashvathama. And when you take bath standing on his head, after that you perform the funeral rites of your son. So that brings us to the end of the 7th chapter. That we see in here the trance of Vyasadeva. The lesson there is that if you follow the instruction of your guru, everything will become visible to you. So it's the same Srila Vyasadeva. But Narad Muni asked him to meditate deeply on what is for the benefit, and that's what he did. And now everything became revealed. The chapter contains the famous Atmaram verse, Atmanamascha Munya Nigrantapya Urukrame, glorifying Sukadeva Goswami and glorifying Bhagavatam also. The question that is asked is that why did Sukadeva Goswami, who was already a liberated person, listen to the Bhagavatam? And the point that is made is that even those who are liberated, they draw sustenance and pleasure from Krishna Katha, specifically Bhagavatam. So it glorifies Sukadeva Goswami as an Atmaramas, as one who is fully self-sufficient. And it glorifies Bhagavatam, Krishna Katha, that even one as great as Sukadeva Goswami, he ran to take shelter of the Bhagavatam. So how great is the Bhagavatam? And we also see Krishna's interaction with the devotees. That we see a contrast between Ashwathama and Arjuna. The Ashwathama is described as Asharanam. He has no shelter. What is his shelter? His anger, his mind, the modes. And because of that, he is always worried about or the mood that he is operating is Swapranan, Yah Paraprane. So the mood that is operating upon Swapranan, that for my life, Paraprane, I have to take another person's life. So this is the jungle mentality, eat or be eaten. And then in contrast to that, we see Arjun's mood, that he is Karmani Matam Vasudevasya. That simply by acting according to the desire of Krishna, he is always protected and glorified. And in the chapter, we also see Krishna testing his devotees. So being under Krishna's protection does not mean that you kick off your shoes, put your feet up, and then just relax and say, okay, Krishna, now protect me. But being under Krishna's protection means that you're actively doing what needs to be done. And Krishna is testing. So Krishna is testing Arjuna. He says that you promised Draupadi you would kill, but still it's not good to kill a Brahman. It's not good to kill the son of your guru, especially since the guru is dead. Now, he is the representative of the guru. And we see that Arjuna passes with flying colors. So Krishna tests the devotees and they pass, and then he glorifies them. So the glory of Arjuna is how intelligently he solved the dilemma of killing and not killing Ashwathama at the same time. So we come to the 8th chapter, the prayers of Queen Kunti. So Arjuna did not kill Ashwathama, but he cut off his top knot and took out the money and left him in disgrace. So Ashwathama is still angry. And now he throws the Brahmastra at the womb of Uttara. So Parishad Maharaj is there in the womb of Uttara. His father, Abhimanyu, has already been killed. So in the 8th chapter, we see Krishna entering into the womb of Uttara and personally protecting Maharaj Parikshit. So this is the reason why Sutta Goswami was talking about the backstory, because he wants to introduce Parishad Maharaj to us. That this is the person who within the womb had darshan of Krishna. This is the person who was attacked by the invincible Brahmastra. And the Brahmastra failed to kill him. So we are getting a sense of the glories of the person who spoke, who inquired about the Bhagavatam. And now we see the rasas change in the 8th chapter. We see Krishna protecting Arjun in Sakhya Ras. We see him protecting Parikshit Maharaj in Shantaras. And now Queen Kunti approaches him, and we see the Vatsalya Ras prominent, where Queen Kunti glorifies Krishna over and over again with very, very beautiful prayers. This is the first significant prayer in the Bhagavatam, and it is interesting to note that it is spoken by a woman. So many times they say that woman is weaker or spiritually weaker, but the Bhagavatam doesn't agree with that. The first prominent prayer that is spoken in the Bhagavatam, that is one of the most glorified prayers of the Bhagavatam, is spoken by a woman, by Srimati Kunti Devi. And even though in the prayer she says that, what do I know, I'm a woman, but she speaks some of the most philosophically deep points, subtle points. She glorifies Krishna as Akinchan Gochar. Same mood of 1866 Bhagavad Gita, that one who has given up all shelters. For that person, Krishna is the shelter. And glorification of Kunti Devi. So, so we see the prayer of Kunti Devi establishing also what should prayers to the Lord be like. So she begins with the glorification of the Lord. Then she talks about her own position with humility. Then she asks for benedictions. And she concludes by asking for forgiveness. So the acharyas say, this is how we must pray to Krishna. We glorify him. We take cognizance of our own fallen position. We ask Krishna for what we want. And then we ask forgiveness from Krishna in case we are imposing on him. Now Krishna can do anything he wants, but still our mood is that we're sorry if this is going to upset you, because ultimately we are still the product of the modes. And part of the forgiveness is also accepting the fact that whatever Krishna does is for our best. So there is a very elaborate section on, not in the Bhagavatam, but in other scriptures, about prayers and different kinds of prayers. And for those who read it, they use the prayers of Kunti Devi as a template for a certain kind of prayer. Now, moving on to the 9th chapter, which is the passing away of Bhishma Devi. So Kunti Devi asks Krishna to stay, but he has been away from Dwarka for a while. So he indicates that he is going to Dwarka, and Maharaj Yudhishthira appears before him, and completely dejected and morose, because he's been contemplating all that has been done in order to make him the emperor. In very similar mood to Arjun's. That Arjun was before the war, and now Yudhishthira has witnessed so much of killing, so much of carnage, and he's just unable to take on the role. And Krishna speaks to him, but he's still not convinced. And then one might say that Krishna was able to convince Arjun, why wasn't he able to convince Yudhishthira? And the reason is because he wanted to glorify another of his devotee, Bhishma Devi. So this is Krishna's nature, that he gives his devotee a higher position than himself. He's making this point that I tried to convince Yudhishthira and I failed, so I am taking the help of Bhishma, who has a higher position than me. And of course, Krishna accompanies many things at the same time. He is he's talking about, he's reciprocating to the mood of Bhishma. Bhishma is sitting over there, meditating deeply on Krishna. He is not willing to give up his body without seeing Krishna. So Krishna is reciprocating with that mood. And then he goes along with the Pandavas. He asks the Pandavas to dress opulently, to put on their weapons and their armor and their royal clothes. Now, normally when you go to a dying person, you don't dress like that. But Krishna wanted to assure Bhishma that his beloved Pandavas are now properly situated. They have won the war, and now they are the kings and the princes. So the 9th chapter is essentially the prayers of Bhishma Dev and the instructions of Bhishma Dev. So Bhishma's instruction to Arjuna are very summarily presented here, but in the Mahabharata they appear as part of the Shanti Parva. It's one of the, it is actually the longest Parva. And Bhishma instructs Arjuna from Yudhishthir from many perspectives, from political to art of war, etc. And he does that as a service to Krishna because he knows that Krishna wants him to do. And then he turns his attention to Krishna and he prays to Krishna. So we see yet another rasa over here, that Bhishma is relating to Krishna in Virya Ras. So what is the form of Krishna that is meditating on? Parthasarthi. Specifically when Krishna, he got off the chariot with a wheel, rushing towards Bhishma to kill him. And he says that your body is covered with dust. There are specks of blood on your body from the arrows that I have thrown at you. And you're coming to me like a lion comes towards an elephant to kill it. So may that Lord be always there in my meditation. And with this meditation, Bhishma gives up his body. So the lessons we know is that if a devotee cannot go to the Lord will go to him. So when we say that what happens if a devotee can't think of the Lord at the time of death for some reason, Lord will make him think of it. The Lord will go to him. Bhishma couldn't go to Krishna. Krishna went to Bhishma. We see Krishna's eagerness to glorify his devotees. We see Krishna's intense affection for his devotees, that he was willing to break his promise to protect Arjuna. And then we see that how Krishna is reciprocating, that Bhishma is looking at him in the Virya Ras, and Krishna is reciprocating in the same mood. So I'm going a little slow. Okay, so we still have 9 chapters to go. So the 10th and the 11th chapter are essentially Krishna's exit from Hastinapur and entry into Dwarka. And both the chapters basically describe the point that is being made more subtly is Krishna's interaction with his devotees. When he's exiting Hastinapur, the ladies of Hastinapur, they are looking at Krishna, some as a son, some in a conjugal way. And then when he enters into Dwarka, then we see the same mood, that different personalities in Dwarka relate to Krishna in different way, all the way from Shantaras, people who heard the conch, the sound of the conch of Krishna, and they became enlivened, to those who came and shook hands with Krishna in friendship, to those who came and gave blessings to Krishna in Vatsalya, and to the wives of Krishna in Madhurya. Krishna perfectly reciprocates with all his devotees. So Sutta Goswami has gone into a bit of a tangent because he's become absorbed in Krishna Katha. He was talking about Krishna to show the relationship of Parishad Maharaj with Krishna. But speaking about Krishna is so intoxicating that he begins to talk about Krishna. Krishna with Bhishma Dev, Krishna with in Hastinapur and Dwarka. And the sages are a little concerned that our questions may not be answered. So in the 12th chapter, they bring the attention of Sutta Goswami back and said, what about Parishad Maharaj? And Sutta Goswami, he then quickly comes back and he explains, he talks about the glories of Maharaj Parikshit. To show that one who is a devotee is perfect everywhere. Maharaj Yudhishthira is described as a perfect ruler. And it says specifically because he was always meditating on Krishna. Then he speaks about the birth of Sukadeva, of Parishit Maharaj, the birth ceremony, the astrologers who came, they make the predictions, and briefly he speaks about Parishit Maharaj growing under the guardianship of Yudhishthira and himself reflecting the qualities of a Mahabhagavad. So the lesson here is that wherever there is Krishna, there is good fortune and auspiciousness. We can see that in the qualities of Sukadeva Goswami, we can see that in the rule of Maharaj Yudhishthira. And the other point that is made is that bhakti can start at any time. In case of Maharaj Parikshit, it starts in the womb. When the astrologers give him the name Parikshit, they say the reason he is called Parikshit is because he saw the personality of Godhead in the womb of his mother. And since then, he has been examining everything, or he will examine everything to see the same personality. So Parikshit means to examine. So right from the womb, Maharaj Parikshit was a devotee because of his association with Krishna. After the 12th chapter, the next 3 chapters are about the exiting of prominent characters. And the reason they are spoken here is to clear the stage for Maharaj Parikshit to appear. So right now, the stage is as it was after the end of Mahabharata. The Pandavas are ruling, Dhritarashtra is there, Krishna is there. That's the stage. Now, in order for the Bhagavatam to be spoken, in order for Maharaj Parikshit to become center stage, then these characters have to exit. So chapter 13 is Dhritarashtra quits home. And we see that Vidur returns from a long, long pilgrimage. And he has learned the science of the self from Maitreya Muni. And he speaks very heavily to Dhritarashtra. And shaken by the words of Vidur, Dhritarashtra leaves home. And Yudhishthira for a while is perturbed, but then Narad comes and tells him that within a short time, Dhritarashtra, who is practicing Astanga Yoga on the banks of the river Ganges, will give up his body. And the fire that he will create, his wife Gandhari will enter. And Vidur will carry on with his pilgrimage. So the lesson here is that everybody needs a guru. So that point has been made over and over again. So here we see that Vidur acts as a guru for Dhritarashtra. He's a younger brother, but because he's more advanced in spiritual realization, he acts as a guru. And until Vidur comes, Dhritarashtra has been leading a very miserable life. Externally, he was living in opulence, but Vidur describes that you're getting old. You're going to die. And you're living like the pet dog of Bhima. So what kind of a satisfaction are you getting? And the duty of the guru is not to speak kind words just for the pleasure of the disciple or to speak soothing words. The word guru means heavy. It means one who cuts. And we see Vidur playing that role. We see Narad Muni playing that role. Very heavy on Srila Vyasadeva. That everything that you have done is is worthy of being condemned. And Vidur is speaking similarly heavy words, but for the benefit. The disciples who accept this chastisement, they get the ultimate benefit. And then we see Narad Muni also speaking heavy words to Yudhishthir. When Yudhishthir is perturbed that where has Dhritarashtra gone? Who will take care of him? He's blind. Then Narad Muni says that since when have you become the caretaker of Dhritarashtra? Do you really think that you can protect Dhritarashtra? Are you taking the position of the personality of Godhead? And then Yudhishthira realizes his mistake. And then he also becomes calm. The next chapter, 14th, is the disappearance of Krishna. So we see that Arjun has gone to Dwarka to see the welfare of Krishna. And Yudhishthira is seeing a lot of ill omens. And seeing all these bad omens, he's concerned. And then finally Arjun comes back and he confirms the suspicions of Yudhishthira that Krishna has left. Okay, next verse, next chapter, 15, is the Pandavas retire timely. So we see over here that after Yudhishthira hears about the disappearance of Krishna and Yadavs, and then Arjun shares that how he lost his power from being the foremost bowman, the foremost warrior. He was unable to protect the wives of Krishna from insignificant cowherdsmen. They were people from the jungle. He is not able to pick the same Gandhi that struck fear in the hearts of his enemies. So hearing all, and then Arjun is so perturbed, and then he remembers the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. And then he becomes pacified. And then all the Pandavas develop deep renunciation in their heart. And then they retire, they go away, and ultimately they go back to Godhead. So the lesson here is that everybody is dependent on the Lord. All kinds of beauty or power or wealth, everything comes from the Lord. And till the Lord wants it, it's there. If he doesn't want it, it's not. And the second lesson is the achintya nature of the pastimes of Krishna. So when people discuss about Krishna disappearing, then they get confused. The acharyas say that Krishna does his pastimes also to bewilder the atheists. So when the atheists hear that Krishna died because of the arrow shot by a hunter, they say, "Oh, look, Krishna is a person." But the lesson is that best to accept the understandings. The pastimes of Krishna is mysterious, but the acharyas give us the understanding. Yeah. Chapter 16 is the focus is now Parikshit Maharaj. So Krishna has gone, the Pandavas have gone, Dhritarashtra has gone, Bhishma has gone, Ashwathama is more or less disappeared. So Parikshit Maharaj is now center stage. And the 16th chapter is how Parikshit Maharaj receives the age of Kali. So Sutta Goswami fast forwards about 2 decades now. The Parikshit Maharaj is now the emperor of the world, and he's ruling the entire world just like his grandfather did, just like Maharaj Yudhishthir did. And everything is auspicious, but then he starts noticing discrepancies and understanding that this discrepancy needs to be corrected. He begins to travel. And there he realizes that Kali is entered. So he sees the personification of Kali beating a bull. And he challenges Kali. So that gets us to the 17th chapter, punishment and reward of Kali. So Maharaj Parikshit, when he sees this incident, he asks the bull that what is the cause of her distress? And he says that you must share it with me, because then only I can give you relief from suffering. And as a king, it's my duty to protect dharma. So if somebody is suffering under my reign, I'm also going to bear the sinful reaction. So please tell me, what is the cause of your suffering? And Dharma refuses to identify the cause of his suffering. Or at this point, it's the bull. He refuses to identify. Why? Because he says that the law of Dharma is very complicated. It's very difficult for me to understand who is the cause and what is the effect. And because of that, it is not easy for me to prove who is killing and who is being killed. And then he says that if I identify the perpetrator, then I will also begin to identify with the perpetrator. So the point is making is that if I think too much on somebody that may be the cause of my suffering, I will also develop a consciousness like him. And then finally he says that with the exception of Krishna, everybody is dependent. So how can one dependent person be the cause of suffering of another dependent person? So Maharaj Parikshit, when he hears these very elevated words, he understands that the bull is no other than Dharma. And he quickly takes out his sword to kill Kali. And then Kali surrenders to him. Maharaj Parikshit, as a Kshatriya, says, if you have surrendered to me, I will protect you. So being protected, Kali asks for a place to live in. And Maharaj Parikshit gives him 4 places to live in. Wherever there is gambling, wherever there is animal slaughter, wherever there is prostitution, and wherever there is drinking of wines or intoxicants, you can live there. So Kali said that under your rule, these do not happen anywhere. So you're essentially not giving me a place to live. So Maharaj Parikshit gives him a 5th place, that wherever there is gold that is hoarded. So that gets us to the 18th chapter of Maharaj Parikshit cursed by a Brahman boy. So we see here Maharaj Parikshit understanding that gold could be a place of Kali. He uses gold to spread the Sankirtan movement, the teaching movement. So this point is emphasized here to establish the context that what happens next is not the activity of a bewildered soul. Maharaj Parikshit was never under the influence of Kali. And Maharaj Parikshit himself was a perfect devotee. So that's why the chapter is, its preamble is glorification of Maharaj Parikshit as a devotee. Because anybody else can become susceptible. But one who is serving the Lord is protected by the Lord. So the understanding is what happens next is by the will of the Lord. Just like Arjun was put under illusion, that same thing happens to Maharaj Parikshit so that the Bhagavatam can be spoken. So we see Maharaj Parikshit insulting Shamik Rishi and his son Shringi, cursing Maharaj Parikshit to die in 7 days. And the understanding also is that if under the rule of Maharaj Parikshit, Kali had not entered, then how was Shringi contaminated as a Brahman? The acharyas say that the cursing of Maharaj Parikshit by Shringi is the beginning of the age of Kali. But it is not included in the age of Kali. So the contamination of Shringi is also the desire of Krishna. And we understand that because even though he committed this horrendous act of cursing for a very minor transgression, a Mahabhagavat, he did not suffer any reactions from it. Firstly, because he was a child. Secondly, because Maharaj Parikshit, that is said that Maharaj Parikshit was competent to reverse the curse or to curse Shringi. But Maharaj Parikshit, he never bears any ill will. So there is no Vaishnava Prad. Maharaj Parikshit did not take offense to what Shringi did. And then most importantly, we see that Shramik Rishi, the father of Shringi, praying to the Lord for forgiveness for his son. So he was actually protected by the prayers of another Vaishnava. So from that we understand that Shringi also was masterfully picked by the Lord to do a certain duty, help in the pastime, but not suffer because of it. And that gets us to the last chapter, which is the appearance of Sukadeva Goswami. So when Maharaj Parikshit understands that he has 7 days to live, then he gives up his kingdom. He crowns Jamjay as the emperor, and then he goes on the bank of the Ganges, with the resolve to fast for the remaining 7 days. And the sages they assemble there. They congratulate Maharaj Parikshit on his decision, and they promise that we will stay with you till the end. So Maharaj Parikshit, with the fortune of having the association of some of the most exalted personalities, he begins to ask them questions. What is the duty of a person? And what is the duty of a person who's about to die? And different sages give different answers based on karma or gyan or rastang. And then Sukadeva Goswami enters. So this is the second description of Sukadeva Goswami. That is completely renounced. He is Mahapurush just by his physiognomy, the structure of his body, and he is highly respected. When he enters, with the exception of very few people like Vyas, his father, and Narad Muni, everybody enters, gets up on their feet to respect him, and they give him an elevated position. So this is the position of Sukadeva Goswami. And then Maharaj Parikshit, he again asks question that four things he says. He says kartavyam, that what should I do? And he asks it in the context of 4 things. Shrotavyam, that what should men hear? Japamyam, what should they speak, chant? Smartavyam, what should they remember? And bhajaniyam, what should they worship? And because he had just heard so many contradictory views, he says viprayama, that also tell me what they should not hear, what they should not speak about, what they should not remember. Because he didn't want to be presented with alternatives. You do this, you do this. So when something is defined both through positive and negative, then it is a definitive description. So this brings us to the end of the 19th chapter. And here we again see the lessons that the shelter of a guru is very important. That Maharaj Parikshit has been glorified as a Mahabhagavat, but he is taking shelter of another devotee, because that is the only way to make advancement. And the point that is also made is that a devotee is always protected, but the devotee never takes the protection for granted. Maharaj Parikshit, he did not say that, oh, okay, I saw Krishna in the womb, I'm his devotee, I have good lineage, so fine. But we see him striving till the very last moments of his life to improve his spiritual position. That is the nature of a devotee, trying to continuously serve the Lord even till the last moment of their life. And the final point is made is that the passing of a devotee is always glorious. We see so many exalted devotees pass away in the first canto because they are always protected. Now one still laments the fact that their association is no longer there. But one does not become bewildered by it. So that brings us to the end of the first canto. I did go over time. My apologies for that. So I'm going to stop over here, see if somebody has any quick questions or comments.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, this is Parikshit. Definitely wanted to say thank you so much for doing this service for our everyone's benefit. Thank you so much. I did have a quick question, slightly tangent to the content of Bhagavatam. I was talking about someone to a colleague who's disabled but still spiritual. So, we talk about how hearing Bhagavatam and chanting can really help, is necessary or a big component of making spiritual progress. What about people who are disabled and cannot hear or see? What does spiritual progress for those people mean, and how they can make spiritual progress?
Thank you. It's a good question. It's asked. It's asked often. So the beauty of bhakti is that it is multifaceted. There's not just one path within bhakti. So Prahlad Maharaj says, Shravana Kirtana Smarana Bandham, Padasevana Das. So many ways in which one can bring their mind to Krishna. That if one cannot speak and hear, one can read. One cannot speak and hear and read, one can meditate. One cannot even do that, one can do some service. So Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan, he would see an old lady, and every day morning she would go to Yamuna, get a bucket of water and for the temple. And Srila Prabhupada said that she is going back to Godhead. So the disciples were surprised because they were of this mood, you have to chant 16 rounds and you have to preach widely and this and that. And then Prabhupada clarified that because she is doing the service that she can do to the best of her, with utmost sincerity. So ultimately the services that we do are just demonstration of our sincerity. There's nothing that Krishna lacks that we can provide. But what he lacks is our affection and sincerity. So that's what we demonstrate. There's always some way or the other by which we can serve Krishna. If we have the sincerity, and the reciprocation of Krishna will be there, that will enable us to serve even more.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Okay, so if there are no more questions, then we can end over here. I'll turn it over to Parikshit Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, just one quick question about Asvatthama. He has done so much abominable act, but we know he was supposed to become the next Indra or Brahma.
Next Vyasadeva.
Yes, Vyasadeva. How come?
He has he has 350,000 years of purification to go through. So that's what he is doing now. He is going through purification for purifying himself of the acts that he did, and then he will become qualified to take the position of the next Vyas.
Mm-hmm. That means there is still hope for whatever action somebody can do. There is still hope of purification and getting to a very, very high level as well.
It is, and Ashwatthama is getting the role of Vyasadeva, which is an exalted position. But there is, we have hope to get a position even higher than Ashwatthama, which is go back to Krishna. Mm-hmm. Ashwatthama's position at the end of the day is still material. And even though it's Chiranjeevi, but Chiranjeevi means that eventually he will die, he just has a long life. But it's hope for us that He has 350,000 years to purify himself to get another material position. We have a few years to purify ourselves to get a far superior position, which is to go back to the spiritual world. So we are much more ambitious than Ashwatthama that way.
Thanks to Srila Prabhupada, no? He gave us the elevator process.
Yes, thanks to Prabhupada, thanks to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we have the elevator.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, just a
Hare Krishna,
connected
Prabhuji.
question.
Go ahead, Prabhu.
Sorry. So just a quick connected question, Prabhu. I mean, as per the Chiranjeevi's, Ashwatthama is also Chiranjeevi and Vyasadeva is also. So when we're talking about that Ashwatthama being the next Vyasa, so I mean, this Chiranjeevi point of view is both going to be the same position. So is it referring the Chiranjeevi as Krishna Vaishampana Vyasa as a person or as a position?
So in Mahabharata, the disciples of Srila Vyasadeva, they ask him very similar question. Now, I'm not aware of Vyas being a Chiranjeevi, but the position of Vyas is eternal. And they ask him, who were you? What was? So he talks about his past, and then he talks about his future also. And he says that because he is Trikalakya, he knows what's going to happen. He says that when I give up the post of Vyas to the next Vyas, I will become one of the Saptarishis. So he goes on to take the position of one of the Saptarishis.
Okay, that clarifies. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I just wanted to thank you, Prabhuji. It is so wonderfully you explained, especially the follow helps how the first 3 chapters establish the goal and how to achieve and Krishna's protection. And following that, each characters are introduced like Vyasdev in like initial chapters, and then like Parikshit Maharaj, and the slightest tangent due to the deep intoxication due to bhakti. There is a slight tangent and sages reminding and coming back to that. So that flow is so wonderful, Prabhuji. I wanted to thank you for your efforts. It really helped. I think I will remember for probably ever.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for the encouragement. Okay, Parikshit Prabhu, over to you. So all of you have been doing a wonderful.
Sorry, Prabhu, I was on mute.
Oh, no worries.
I got muted. So we can end here. Next week, Vikas Prabhu will start on Canto 2. So we can end with the Vanchakalpa prayers. Vanchakalpa Trayulpascha Kripa Sindhu Devacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Anantakoti Vaishnavindiki